Today, we're going to road test the King James Version. But if you've never read the King James Version, well, you need this road test. You need to, and we're not only going to just sit in it, we're going to buckle up. We're going to go on road. My name is Craig and this is Morning Star Quest, where this is your journey through the Bible. The Bible can be daunting to read, especially if you're new to it. Now, I want to take you through this to give you, well, a full perspective, not just, okay, let's just read this bit, or this Bible is good for you, or this one may be confusing, but I want to take you through a road test where we really just get the rubber on the road and just make sure that you know that this Bible, if you're going to buy it, or if you're going to use it, or if it's the only one you have right now, that it is the right Bible for you. Before we just jump in, I want to go, well, I want to look in the revision mirror for a little bit with its history. Now, you're probably aware that, well, King James, he didn't write it, but he did commission it back in 1600s or 1604. And at 1611, he published it. Now, there's a couple of reasons why he did this. Some might say that King James was trying to be a little bit altruistic, or trying to form one church, because there were a few little divisions here and there, and he wanted to have one specific Bible that was for all. Now, there was a Bible called the Geneva Bible, and in its notes or the comments, it did lean towards Calvinism. Now, Calvinism, without going into too much detail, was unconditional selection. So that meant that before time, God had already selected whether you were going to heaven or hell, and that was it. It was a given. Now, just reading the Bible, we know that Calvinism isn't biblical. I know that's up for debate, but it isn't biblical. Now, there was another problem with the notes. It was pretty critical of the monarchy and the Church of England. That's, yeah, you get why he wrote the Bible, and at the time there was a lot of criticism on either side. So how do you unite everybody? Well, you've got to make sure it is accurate. This Bible has to be word for word translation from the original text. You can't go one side or the other. And that's where the King James Bible shines the best, because it is the most accurate translation from the Bible that they could do at the time, word for word. So let's test the suspension of the King James Bible. You know, how does it feel? Imagine breathtaking scenery. You know, the language beautiful, poetic. It's imagine rolling hills and elegant turns of phrase and powerful imagery, which is beautiful. However, I mean, it can be a little bit of a bumpy ride. I mean, there are words like, what have we got here? We've got these and thous, and that's just one level. And you could say that once you get past all the these and the thous, it kind of just gives you a little bit more of a settled ride. But there are other things that could get in the way with trying to understand what the Bible is. This Bible is trying to say. Like, there's the verb let. Now, we know it today as to let someone pass, let them go. In 2 Thessalonians 2:7, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he now will let, until he be taken out of the way. Now, I'm not going to go into the theological part of this, but the word let here doesn't mean letteth let, or let go, or let them do whatever. Let's just read the NIV, or the New International Version. For the secret power of lawlessness is already at work, but the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way. So in this context, the word let means to hinder or to impede, but it doesn't always mean that, and you just have to read it in context, do a bit of research. And then we have the word meat. I mean, you and I know it as flesh of an animal, but in this context, it means everything, including fruit, vegetables. Genesis 1:29. And God said, Behold, and I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And in the other translations it says, it shall be for you food. It's interchangeable. Now there is the word conversation. You and I today would use that as having a chat or conversing with each other. And most of the time that is in the King James Version. But it can also mean to, signifies conduct or manner of living. So in Philippians 3:20, for our conversation is in heaven. Our conversation, our manner or our conduct is in heaven. So there are quite a few different things here that when we're trying to sit in there and get a comfortable ride and we think we're just going to coast along, that's not what's going to happen in the King James Bible. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes I think if we do a little bit of work, do a little bit of study, we'll understand things so much better, so much more. Now let's get under the hood. What makes King James Version tick? Well, it's based on the manuscripts that they had at the time, the Textus Receptus and the Hebrew texts. Now, they went for word, like I said before, to make sure that they could unite everybody. They couldn't have their thoughts in the text or comments added to it. So they had to just go down the line, word for word, and translate it from the original languages, which I know is not easy and it will never be perfect, because the only way to be perfect is to have it in Greek or in the original Hebrew. But with that comes one thing, word for word. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to learn a different language. I have, or if you know two or more languages, you know that there are always these words that come up and they say this word is in Spanish, but there's no English equivalent. So that's the battle that the translators had to address. And I think the fact that it's a year level 12 reading level, I think that's probably the best way to actually get word for word. I think if they were to do it with the people on the street language, they might have missed the mark a little bit, but I think they have done really well to get word for word and to get it down the line and to get the meaning correct as best as possible. Now, if you're having trouble with words from the King James Bible, there is kingjamesbibledictionary.com. I'll leave it in the description. If there's anything you're not sure about, go to that website address, put the word in, and you'll get the basics of that meaning, and it will help you with the King James Version. Which brings me to navigation. This is like GPS. This is like your maps. Now, if you're just starting out and you've got a King James Bible, I think the best thing is to get a study manual. It is a requirement, I would say, and I feel that it just would encourage you to do a little bit more study. So who is this Bible for? Yes, it was to unite all Christians under one banner. But what about today? I know when I was growing up in a Lutheran church, it was very classic. We would do it in the liturgy, in the talking bits between the songs and the sermons. And I found it so interesting because when we said the Lord's Prayer, say, our Father who art in heaven, for ages, I didn't know what that really meant. And I just remember maybe being 13, 15, repeating this over and over again and going, oh, I think I know what that means now. It took me ages. But I found it so interesting when the pastor changed it. Now, I'm not quite sure what version he changed it to, but it was more contemporary. Let's say the New King James Version. And it was Our Father in heaven, or Our Father who is in heaven. It just threw me. I thought, I like the old way. It's so funny how that works. And it took me ages to get the modern language into my rote fashion memory, but I can understand there are people that just love the King James Version because of that language. And I always thought, even though I wanted to, say, read a different version of the Bible because I wanted to understand it a little bit easier, I still loved that rich, colourful language that just didn't feel like, in the modern language, just didn't feel the same. However, you know, I've got to say, reading the modern language, I understood. Wish I could understand that. I understood the Bible way much better. See, I don't think the modern language is helping me much, but you get what I'm saying. The other thing is, if you are trying to study the Bible, you want to get all the different versions, but the King James Version would just give you a different perspective, a better perspective maybe, of just some wording that just gives you that more poetic look at the word and get a different aspect. And for students, just to get that nuance of that word and just get the right meaning. Is it for beginners? I mean, that's what this whole video is about. Is it for beginners? Now, got to remember, it's like driving. You get into a car and the King James Version is more like a manual car. You have to do a bit of work to change the gears, to know what gear you need to be in, to do a little bit of extra study. Back in the 80s, we've got a few different channels here. I mean, it really doesn't matter which channel, but there was Channel 7 and Channel 9. Channel 7, they didn't have the money. They were on a shoestring budget. And if a camera broke for a news broadcast, they'd have to fix it on the spot. If something broke, they knew how to fix it. They fixed it straight away. They kept things going and they only bought things when they needed it. But Channel 9, they had the money. If they broke a camera, they just got a new one. It didn't matter. But if something broke, they would have to wait for the new one or have a redundancy to make sure that there was a new one already just in the truck, which is still fine. But if you want to just learn a little bit extra or know some more, then the King James Version will be great, because then you have to study, you have to do a little bit more work, you have to know which gears to use, and you will be able to understand things, or more so, just get a better or a deeper understanding of what God is trying to say. Now this brings me to interior comfort. For some, it is very elegant, it is very plush, it is timeless, sophisticated, and the language itself is just a source of enjoyment and beauty. But then, on the other hand, for others, they might not see that. So if you're a beginner, or if you're just starting out and you haven't read the Bible before, the King James Version may be a good choice if you are willing to do a little bit of study. But if not, sometimes it can feel a little, well, I don't want to say stuffy, but it can feel archaic. It can feel old worldly, and you think, well, we live in today, so we want something of that. Now, one thing I found was the language used in the King James Version was more, well, I guess it's today, if you were going to university and you would write an essay, that's how the King James Version would be to everyone in the 1611 times. But that's not what they would have spoken on the street. Like, for example, Matthew 6, 9, 13. King James Version is, "After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." But they would have spoken it. And now I've got AI to give me the best guess, so this is not necessarily perfect, but this is the best guess. Well then, pray like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's very close to what we have today. So the King James Version at the time was one step or two steps above what everybody else would have been saying, more on an educational level. But then you've got to remember, a lot of people were illiterate at the time, so then they would be hearing this from their pastors or priests, when I'm reading the King James Version. I'll read this because I wrote it out before. And I found that when I read it, I do go to a deeper understanding, but I feel a little fatigued, like driving for a long distance with the windows down. The experience is not a bad one, but you do feel a little exhausted, or you just think, oh, okay, we're at the end of the drive, I can just put it down and rest for a little bit. And you do feel the bumps along the way, but you do get to feel the appreciation of those bumps and the study. But when you're not used to it, it can be a little overwhelming. Now, let's get down to the audio system. We always love the audio system. How does it sound? Now, there is one thing that people usually love to read the King James Version out loud. It is great for gatherings and crowds and doing it in that way because it's more poetic, and it seems to just resonate nice in a crowd. However, it can for some be a little dated. Now, and I found that whenever I was trying to understand it back in the 80s, I found it colourful, I found it wonderful, I found it great, but I couldn't get into the Bible. And so as a beginner, I needed to search for something else. I'll go through that maybe in another video, but I could definitely see the worth in going through the King James Version Bible, but I also wanted to read a different version so it could even help me with the King James Version. Let's move to the safety features. And that is that, well, I guess technically there aren't any. You just get word for word the translation. There are no safety, there are no barriers, and there are things that to our modern ears can be a little triggering. However, if you do a little bit of research, it's actually not that bad. Like, I'll explain. King James Version, he that oppresseth, you got a lot. He that oppresseth the poor reproacheth his maker, but he that honoureth him hath mercy on the poor. That's a bit hard to say, but there is a lot of he's there. And you think, well, okay, but that for modern ears, that just sounds one-sided. Now, like the word meat, that means for food. In this, he does still mean mankind overall. The New International Version is whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honours God. There is no he's or she's, and it's not trying to cover that up. It is just correcting what is in the original text. So we just need to do our research, a bit of study. So is the King James Version for you? That's a very good question. It offers very historical and beautiful significance for anyone that reads it, but it does require some effort from the driver. Now, if you do want a bit of a smoother ride, there are some better choices, and I'm gonna go through a whole heap of other road tests for other different translations for the Bible, and I'd love to meet you over there. Go do something awesome for God, and I'll catch you in the next one.